Welcome to
Okay.
Cambridge Inside
Yeah,
Out.
finally, a little
Finally,
technical
a little late.
difficulties.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, today's July.
He's Robert Winters.
Oh, I'm Robert Winters.
And July 16th.
July 16th,
Judy
2019.
Nathans. Right, okay.
All right. So, anyway, we're kind of now, I think, at the midway point
In what?
through the
Life?
great grand month when new city council candidates
Oh.
or known
Oh, we
city
have to
council
get their
candidates
signatures.
have to
That's right.
pull out their nomination papers and
Like a little- 2
file
weeks
signatures.
exactly, actually.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. So they started doing it July 1st, and they will be required to get their nominating signatures in no later than July 31st. And meanwhile, the election commission has actually been doing
There's
the
some that already
certification.
have done it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, bunches of candidates have already turned in sufficient signatures. There's one little glitch. It was quite interesting.
Oh.
Actually, required some intervention with the Cambridge Law Department.
Oh dear, what was that?
So I was at the election. You know what they do is when candidates file signatures, they the staff in the election commission's office do what they call provisional certification. So then they let the candidates know how many signatures they got, and and then they proceed. So if they break their minimum 50, the candidates don't have to go gather more if they don't choose to. And you can only turn in up to 100 signatures.
Right, but most people get more because you never know who's going to sign
You
twice
definitely
or
want to get
something.
more. Exactly right. But here's the catch is that
Yeah.
the state law requires that the forms that the people are
Yeah.
signing have to be completely filled out. So all these fields for like what office you're running for, what's the date, etc., have to be
Oh, you mean
filled
the
out.
candidate has to fill it
Yeah.
out.
So there were two candidates who were provisionally getting signatures certified, but when it actually went to the election commissions, one of the election commissions pointed out that there was some missing information on the forms.
Okay.
And they said, well, we can't really officially certify these signatures yet until we get an opinion from the law department. So the law department did come back and they said, we can't count those signatures.
No, wait, I don't get it. Couldn't they just fill in the missing information?
No, because the thing is that even though
Once it turns in.
it seems reasonable, but the thing is presumably when you, the candidate, are going up to
Yeah.
a voter,
Oh,
and
it
you
should have shown all that.
yeah, and you didn't tell them what you were running for, and then they
Holy-
signed it.
Holy moly!
Yeah, so it's an
Oh.
oversight. What actually happened?
Yeah.
One candidate had turned it had everything right on the first page, but hadn't done it on the second page.
Wow.
Which is completely
Yeah,
understandable.
people like not going
Yeah.
and turning on a
So
backside.
that candidate got the signatures from the first page certified officially, but the other ones didn't count. Now they said, well, this could be a real problem if they used up. You're only allowed 3 sheets. What would happen if you turned in all 3 sheets and then they weren't counted? Would you not be allowed on the ballot? And the answer is you would not be allowed on the ballot. But the law department
Yeah.
came back with their good grace and
Okay.
great wisdom,
Yeah.
and they said, however,
Okay.
even though there's a limitation of 3, if somebody screwed up a sheet,
Yeah.
a technicality,
You're
they
allowed to.
gave the election commission then the authority to issue a fresh sheet,
Mm-hmm.
and they could even go back to those same voters and have them re-sign.
Huh.
But the form would have to be filled out.
So they are now being allowed to
Yeah,
use.
so they have to do a redo. Now,
Is that only one person that happened to?
There's actually 2 candidates.
Oh.
One candidate has now actually turned in the sheet number 3 and has
Oh.
gone over the 50 limit, so no need to go any further.
Yeah.
There's one other candidate who, notice how I'm deftly avoiding the names here.
Yeah,
Because
I'll ask
honestly,
you later off
but
the
it's
air.
it's an oversight. I
Yeah.
really can't.
But it is. I'm sure they said it oral.
It
to
says
the
it-
person I'm running for. It just wasn't
Exactly
on the form.
right. It wasn't on the form,
Because
right?
nobody signed something and said, "What are
Yeah.
you running?" I mean, they want to know.
So there was
Yeah.
another candidate, city council candidate, who
Mm-hmm.
had one little field missing, just a small thing missing,
Mm.
but in fact the 40 signatures
Wow.
were not counted, and
Wow.
so now that candidate has to go back and do them fresh. But
At least
if,
they're allowing them another page to do that.
yeah, I mean that candidate probably doesn't need that extra page, but it's nice to know that it's there.
But what happens if then some of those people then sign somebody else's papers? Because
Well, that's right, because
the
the
later
order
you
would
turn it
matter.
in, the more that's going to
That's right,
happen, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Now, what could really be a problem, so I put a little note on the website,
Whose
just
website?
mine, just
Yeah.
to sort of remind people.
Oh,
I said,
oh,
make
okay.
sure you fill out every field
Good.
before you do it. And
Yeah.
if there are any candidates watching, make sure you fill
Yeah.
out every field, make no exceptions.
It's really
and
important.
notarize every
Yeah.
sheet.
Oh, you have to notarize it?
Yeah, and you know, the doomsday scenario from my point of view is what happens if a candidate thinks they did everything right, they turn their papers in like on July 31st and go
then-
home and they say,
then
well, I
it's too
turned in,
late.
I
Yeah.
turned in 99 signatures and you
Yeah.
forgot to fill in one of the
Yeah.
forms.
Right.
Now it's too late.
Right, so
you're
you're
not on the
giving
ballot.
them a 2-week warning, which is good.
Exactly, right. So anyway,
Wow, all right.
things have actually been getting pretty
Yeah,
hot and heavy.
No, we didn't meet last week, but there
Right.
were tons of meetings that you went
Tons
to
of
some,
meetings,
I
yeah.
went to some,
Yeah.
lots of things, so.
Actually, I want to say a few more things, quick things about
about
the
the
candidates here,
candidates,
only
yes.
because, you know, there was the big rush, you know,
Yeah.
the first flush when you get a lot of people pulling papers in July 1st, July 2nd, et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then it kind of slowed down. I think there was one candidate who pulled papers on the 11th, you know, for the school committee.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a repeat candidate, Dave Weinstein, right?
Yes, he ran
the school
before,
committee, right? And then I think, okay, was anybody else going to pull papers? We were all waiting, you know, for, actually, I was specifically waiting for John Pitkin to pull papers, which he
Oh,
has
yeah.
not yet done, so
So
he may not be a
running.
candidate, you know, but
Well, does he have financial pages? Isn't that also the first key too?
that's one of the things you can check for, but you
Okay.
don't have to necessarily have
Have-
filed with the state
Because
prior
if you're
to
not
filing
raising
as a
the money yet.
candidate, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then the other question was whether Tim Toomey was going to pull papers or not,
Oh.
right?
But he did, didn't he?
Well, today he did.
Today?
Yeah, I was there when he was pulling papers. Now, one thing I
Wow.
need to emphasize is
Yeah.
that,
It still doesn't.
and this is not just specific to Councilor Toomey, is
Yeah.
that there are currently 29
Nine?
candidates who have pulled papers.
Oh my God, more than the Democratic
Yeah,
candidates.
and the thing is not all of them will necessarily turn in signatures. So just because we have really 30 possible candidates right now,
Unbelievable.
doesn't necessarily mean we're going to
Right.
have 30
Really
coming
gonna
into the
have to
month.
see.
Yeah. So there's some candidates who maybe it was just sort of a curiosity thing, and they may
What's
not
the
actually
story
follow
with
through.
the two sisters?
Twins.
But
Yeah.
they're both, what, are they gonna run
You know-
simultaneously?
Okay. There are some intriguing
Yeah.
things happening in this election that I
know.
can't fully
Are they
explain.
in your candidates page?
Yes, they are. So here's what happened is
All right.
that there are two candidates who ran, was it 4 years ago? I think it was 4 years ago, was Kim Courtney and
Well, they're running
Javier
again, right?
Dietrich,
Yeah.
okay, man and wife, right? They run a restaurant up in North Cambridge. You know, they get into all sorts of controversy, right? Well, they actually pulled papers for 5 candidates.
Oh, well, can you do, what do you mean, they pulled them for other people?
Yeah, you can actually
do
do
that?
that. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So actually,
this-
might as well. So if we can
This is
show
the
this
list
here.
right here, right?
Let's see. Let me just make sure if this. I don't know if this is not working here.
Oh, wait, here?
Oh, okay.
There you
Oh,
go.
I say it right. Okay, let's try it here.
Yeah,
All right. So at
right,
one
so-
time, it was actually Kim Courtney, I believe, who came in and pulled papers for Courtney, Dietrich, Danila, Taylor, and Taylor. Right. I think it's you got to scroll down a little
Wow,
bit to see
yeah,
the bottom
okay,
of the few
yeah.
of those
All
right there.
So this.
Right, Emily and Abigail Taylor, who in fact have exactly the same address and the exact same birth year. So
Wow.
that's because they are in fact twins.
Unbelievable.
but
Not that young either.
so I don't know what the game here is. Is this just done to kind of be disruptive or whatever? It's these are not. I can't. I'm not trying to disparage anyone here, but I can't view this as a sort of a serious collection of candidates here, but they seem to be putting together a slate. They actually wanted to pull papers, I think, for another one as well, and they may still come back with more candidates.
So maybe they want to see which one can get the most signatures?
I don't even think that's what,
Wait,
what
who,
it is.
before you go back, who is John Roberts?
Okay,
Who's
so
submitting?
all right, so today,
Yeah,
it's
that's just today.
in addition to Councilor Toomey
Yeah.
showing up today, because you're looking here at just the challengers. Actually, if you go back,
Oh, right, so
let's
where do we
zoom
go?
out here a little second
All
here.
right.
There's actually something that says a list of all the candidates
Okay,
who pulled
let's
nomination
go-
papers.
Let's do that.
Right, so we'll go back to
Wait,
that
wait,
one
it's
here.
not up here yet.
Right,
There it is.
alrighty,
Okay.
So this one here, this was in the order in which they actually pulled the papers. So,
So the fir-
there's
okay.
council candidates first and then school committee candidates next. So if you scroll down toward the bottom of this table here, what you'll see is sort of the most recent activity after Courtney, Dietrich,
I
Demo, and
see.
Taylor.
Okay.
Then Dennis Carlone came in, pulled papers,
Okay.
and then
Ben
Ben Simon finally got around to
Right.
doing it, and then Sabrina Wheeler, right?
Okay.
Javon Sabrina Wheeler. And then, that was about a week ago.
Yeah.
And then today, Councilor Toomey was in pooled papers. And then this fellow, John Roberts, who's listed in the street listing as a cook, he pulled papers, right? And actually, he was
Interesting.
there, so actually Councilor Toomey and I chatted
I think
with him
they're I
briefly.
think they're being inspired by the Democratic candidates running. I think
Yeah,
all
we're
those
getting,
people. I might as well throw in my
getting
hat.
lots and lots of them. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah, actually, if you scroll down
where?
instead to where the school committee
Oh,
candidates
right.
are.
We shouldn't
So
neglect them.
we
What
actually
is
have
today?
9.
Oh. More people
no-
have joined.
No. This is, I think
Oh.
this is pretty much the same as it's been. But, no, actually, there
No,
have been some
Christopher
relatively
Lim
new.
is new. No?
Relatively new,
Yeah, okay.
but
And
but
Burnett
on
Dawson, I don't know that name.
right. So Monica Bowman and then Alechi Cadete. But if you go down a little
He
further.
ran before.
A little further, Emily Dexter did finally come around,
Yeah,
pulled
okay.
papers, and then David
Good.
Weinstein, who has
ran
run before, so he's
And so
down
was
in the mix.
Alechi. Or did
Alechi-
he run for city council?
No, he ran for
He was
school
school
committee.
committee,
Yeah.
okay.
So anyway,
Oh, boy.
some returning candidates,
Yeah.
who've done it in the past. Again, with the caveat that just because you pull papers doesn't mean you turn them in,
anything,
right? But most of them will. And actually, if you go to the candidate pages,
All right. Yeah,
Which
I need
is,
to. There's no room here with this stupid mouse here. I can't. I have to
Right.
close this one, right?
that's fine. Yeah,
All right, candidate pages.
Yeah,
Here
if
we
you go to the candidate
All right.
pages here, so this is sort of just a different way of portraying things
Yeah.
alphabetically, maybe a bit
Right.
better. So Sukiya Akiba has actually turned in signatures that actually is qualified for the ballot.
Where's that person?
Very first in the list.
Oh,
Very
oh,
first
but
in the
we
list.
don't have a picture. We
No
don't have
picture. There's some.
Is
I
that
don't
a
have your
male or
picture.
female?
Female.
Okay.
Right. So this is the list so far. So the
30 candidates. That's
30
crazy.
candidates.
9 seats.
Right, for 9 seats. Now, bear in
right.
mind, it's
But
30
there's an empty
candidates.
seat.
30 candidates
seats,
also
right.
includes John Pitkin should he follow through
Okay.
on the rumored candidacy.
True.
But one thing that is not in the papers being pulled here right now,
Yeah.
if you stop right there,
Yeah.
if you see in the M's after Councilor Mallon, McGovern, Jeff McNary, now it's Riza Mednick. Now Riza
Oh,
Mednick
you know
has
that-
not pulled papers, but on yesterday, on Monday, did file with the State Office of Campaign and
Do
Political
you know who
Finance.
that is?
Yeah,
It's
she
in your
was.
neighborhood, right?
Yep, she's on Maple Avenue. She actually was one of our fellow member on the Envision Cambridge Advisory Committee.
Oh.
Very active in some
So
nonprofits.
long-term Cambridge person?
Yep, very actively, civically involved. Very much sort of
Profession?
interested in climate change issues. So I imagine
Scientist? I mean,
if she
another
does indeed
profession?
follow through with this, she will be part of a group of candidates, all of whom are
Like
very
looking
much,
for the Joe Devereaux
you know,
vote or the Quentin
well, I don't know
Donovan?
that necessarily that, or they're just
Yeah.
running as a group of candidates. I don't know if they will be
Yeah.
as a slate or anything like that, but there's clearly
Okay.
a strong representation of candidates who are, for whom, like Quentin Zondervan, are
Right.
kind of climate change centered
Okay.
candidates,
All right.
right?
Can you talk about something you have on your webpage?
Sure.
About Cambridge Civic? What is this new association? What's that about?
Yeah, so it's called the Cambridge Civic Coalition. So, all right, so
Yeah.
actually, that's something I hadn't written down too much, but I think it's
Yeah,
worth
we don't
mentioning.
have a link. It's just you mentioned
Yeah.
a new civic or
They have a
Cambridge Citizens
Facebook. They have a
Coalition.
Facebook page as well. So
How did you find out about it?
they contact me. In fact, actually,
Oh.
the interesting thing about it is that there was a piece I wrote about 10 years ago on a Cambridge Civic Journal that was specific to the founding of the Cambridge Civic Association in 1945. Basically, their mission statement. And I said, this is actually a pretty good mission statement. It would be perfectly great today. Well, they took that mission statement. They gave me credit.
Good.
And they basically said
So,
this is pretty good principles to
who
which
are
to
they?
follow. Well, I mean, Suzanne
Any of the people
Gouillet,
running?
some of the people who were
Oh.
calling themselves a group called Livable Cambridge.
Okay, so it's kind of the affordable housing overlay
That's
group that's
related
come out
to that.
a lot of.
I think there's sort of the livability issues. If you go back 20 years, there were groups like, or more than 20 years, really, 25 or more years, there was a group called the Cambridge Citizens for Livable Neighborhoods.
But isn't that livable? Did that morph into livable?
No,
Or am I thinking
no,
livable
they
streets? I don't know.
technically still exist. I
Okay.
believe that,
Oh.
if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken,
CLN. Citizens for
CCLN.
Or CC, yeah.
If
Okay.
I'm not mistaken, I believe the Association of Cambridge Neighborhoods is actually officially listed as
Huh.
CCLN, doing business as Association of
Okay.
Cambridge Neighborhoods. So
Interesting.
it exists. Now,
Right.
doesn't mean the same people are involved
Sure,
or
yeah.
whatever, but you know,
Mhm.
it continues.
Hmm.
Another thing is that, again, some people object when I make this assertion, but the bulk of the people who were affiliated with CCLN also were at the heart of a group back in the late 90s called the Cambridge Residents for Growth Management, CRGM.
How long did that one last?
It existed for a while. It was back when they were doing a lot of citywide downzonings. And very much in the same spirit as the principles that the CCLN supported. And many of the same people. And so that was kind of all the rage at the time,
When was that?
late 90s.
So when did Alewife happen? How did that happen?
So what
under all this
happened-
watch?
So what happened was
Yeah.
that after the demise of rent control, which was
94.
1994 election
Okay.
and implemented come 95 and for
Okay.
2 years following, the general policy within the city council was to promote housing growth. That was in the subsequent years. That's when inclusionary zoning came about, around 1998, I believe. And also they changed zoning in pretty much to allow housing in all zoning
So
districts.
that's what happened. That's how
Yeah.
Alewife happened?
Well, they allowed housing growth in all districts, but the thing is there was still the old zoning in place in terms of allowable densities, et cetera, in places like Alewife. So back in the early aughts, maybe it was about 2004 or 5, I could be a little wrong on
Yeah.
this, the city did produce what they call the Concord-Alewife plan. And in it, they had zoning recommendations that were implemented that
Which-
basically
yeah.
encouraged housing growth to happen in the Alewife
So
Quadrangle.
it just
and the
happened and
Alewife
people
Triangle.
now are complaining about it? I mean.
Well, it's interesting because,
'Cause I get asked about it all the time from people who don't follow stuff. How did that happen? How did
well, what
that
happened is that
Yeah.
the economic, the Concord-Alewife happened before there was sort of economic boom times,
Right. What was
so-
there before?
industrial wasteland really,
Okay.
and some office buildings and,
I mean,
things like that.
the subway that Alewife set was there, but
Yeah, so this
nothing
is
else.
west
Okay.
of the station,
Right, right, yeah.
You
Okay.
know, you can either be north of the tracks, which is the triangle, or south of the tracks is the
Right.
quadrangle,
Okay.
heading down toward Fresh Pond.
Right.
So the Concord-Alewife plan laid out a vision for what should happen in there. And then there was an anticipation that over the next 10, 15 years, housing would grow and things would happen. Well, the housing took off like a rocket, and
It's like 20-story buildings, aren't they?
yeah, so the thing is that the recommendations to actually promote housing growth around there happened much faster than
Then
people had originally
so they really didn't have
anticipated.
time to object in some ways.
So people started objecting because basically, I wouldn't call it the best planning to have that many housing units in what's
There's only
effectively.
one way in, one way out.
It's like a
It's
cul-de-sac.
crazy.
Yeah.
There's no bridge, which was
No
recommended.
bridge, exactly.
Crazy.
So maybe it wasn't
mistake.
the best thought out plans.
Right.
But promoting housing growth was considered sort of a good thing. It's transit-oriented development. It's
Well, that
reasonably
it
close to
definitely was
Alewife,
the first, right.
right?
But none of them are none of them covered inclusion, right? 'Cause it
No,
was
it's
before
all
that.
built after
So
inclusionary.
it's all rentals. There's no
every bit of-
condos either. I think it's all
I
rentals.
think it's primarily rental because
Yeah.
that's where the money was.
Right, it's all
around
rentals,
those
I'm
years,
pretty
right?
sure, yeah.
Back in the 90s, it was all condos were all the rage, but then
True.
rental housing became
Right.
the bigger
And
rage.
now it's sort of God knows what it is.
Yeah,
now.
but the thing is that there's a pretty high turnover out there, so it's not
Yeah.
really what we would, in any
No,
reasonable way,
it's not
think of as
no.
a stable neighborhood.
No,
know,
there's not.
But if
yeah.
you're showing up into Cambridge because you're getting a job in Kendall,
It's a good
you
place to
might
be for a
pick up a
while,
place to
yeah.
live there for a while, whatever. So maybe it'll grow into something
Or
more
if you're
stable.
working out on 128, it's another.
It's very
'cause
much.
It's close to.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. If you can ever get out of there in the car.
Well, although
Right.
going out on Route 2 is probably easier than coming in.
Probably, yeah. But anyway, it took off,
Mm.
and quite honestly,
Concord-Alewife
if you go
plan,
back to
huh.
about 2013 Cambridge
Yeah.
City Council elections, the
Oh,
big
yeah.
hue and cry at the time was.
Yeah.
There's no master plan, this is
Right.
everything's just crazy. But it was
Right.
really driven by people being upset by the fact that it was a traffic nightmare on Alewife Parkway.
And it still is, and it
And-
will be,
and if-
because you can't prevent people
Yeah,
coming
and
from
if you want to
Weston
just go
and
pick
all
up
those places.
groceries over at Whole Foods
Yeah.
or something, it was going to be hard. So so there was a need for that, sure. So they called for a master plan, which eventually morphed into Envision Cambridge.
Wasn't there some master plan though? Or did
There
they
has-
just drop it in the favor
You know,
of Envision?
it's been one of the great lies is
Yeah.
the notion that Cambridge never had a master plan. Of course
Yes,
it did. It's
yeah.
always had master plan,
Right.
but it exists in pieces, like
Yes.
neighborhood studies,
Right.
planning documents. Actually, Cambridge has got more of that type
Someone
of
should have just looked at all that,
documentation.
taken the best out of it, and saved millions of dollars.
Actually, in Envision Cambridge, is a part of what was done. They
Really?
did. They definitely took pieces
Okay.
of
And that shows-
prior studies and
And they
used it.
cited those studies
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that? Okay.
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely true.
I guess someone had to do
You
it.
know, but yeah, I think that a lot of the people who started off, kicked off the whole process, kind of complaining about traffic and the rapid growth of housing around Alewife, which some people think is a great thing and some people think is not such a
I don't know
great
anyone
thing.
who thinks it's a great thing.
Well, I mean, just housing units, just building up a stock of housing,
Yeah,
does
but it's
provide
not,
units.
it's not community, it's
It's
not
not community,
neighborhood,
but-
it's not families,
but
where
if
they're
you-
gonna go to school,
But if you
know.
didn't have that, then everybody
Where
would
would they be? Yeah.
putting even more pressure on
Yeah,
the
good
previous housing stock. So
Well.
it's sort of a relief valve, something I know a
Sort.
thing or two about
Relief.
or other matters.
Well, go into
We'll
that
get
in the
into
next
that in a
segment.
second. Yeah, but anyway, they arguably Envision Cambridge was really spurred just by
We
the
need a
outrage
master
about
plan.
that.
Yeah.
One of the kind of curiosities about the outgrowth of Envision Cambridge is that it really doesn't, though it has the Alewife section on it, it hasn't really been a whole lot of movement on it. So
You mean the whole thing itself?
yeah, on Alewife, and I don't know that in fact there's any real clear vision. The city council certainly hasn't brought up the question about how much of that Envision Alewife stuff is worth being
What about the
implemented.
quadrangle? Is that in the Envision thing?
Much of the quadrangle was already pretty much under development, so I would say the real key thing yet to come is what happens in the Alewife. I said triangle was fully developed. Pardon me.
Right, yeah, right.
The
it's
quadrangle, which
right,
is
that's
south
what-
of the railroad
right.
tracks, that is.
Which is light industrial, which we want to keep like light industrial,
That's right, but the thing is, nobody's changed any zoning
And
to
you need
permit it.
goddamn
And
roads,
meanwhile,
you need
Cabot
bridges and roads.
Fords and others
Yeah.
are buying properties up there, and
Oh,
they
dear.
have big plans now. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to have the city. And now they're not ignorant of what the city's
Right,
intentions
they're not
long term
gonna,
are.
right,
So if they're buying up properties, they're doing so with their eyes wide open, knowing that there is a plan to enact zoning to shape things in a particular
and also,
way.
isn't there a plan to ask those companies to help pay for a bridge? Or
That is
something?
part
Yes.
of the
If
hope.
that doesn't happen, that's crazy.
I think that's
You know,
right. But
you
you
gotta
know,
have other access points into that.
but I mean, many people are going to rail against the evil capitalists who are buying the properties, but ultimately it's the
Hey,
people with the deep
you
pockets.
better just get
Yeah.
friendly with them.
Unless the city wants
Yeah.
to fund the building of a bridge themselves, which they're not going to do.
No, what would it be?
Then basically their
Yeah.
best hope is to have
Yeah.
somebody with deep pockets do something interesting up there, hopefully something everybody can live with and be happy about, and then have them actually, take concrete steps toward making an actual
Yeah.
crossing or more of the railroad tracks to sort of
It's
make that a more
crazy.
unified
Even
area.
if it's just even if it's just for whatever, they need some
Yeah.
access. That's
They need
crazy.
some access, so those who think that just having bicycles and pedestrians is somehow
No.
adequate really are kind
You
of
need-
missing the point.
At least for buses too, or something.
Yeah, some kind of shuttle buses that
Shuttle
get,
buses,
if
right.
people work in there to get them to and
Right.
from the LRT stations.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because somebody
Not everyone wants to get on a scooter.
right, and you can say, oh, it's within a quarter mile of the LRT station, but if you have to walk it
And especially,
and there's
yeah.
no direct connection, it
No,
takes
it's
a
more
long
than
while.
that, because if you had the bridge, it would be, it cuts
much,
out half
it'd much
of
be
it.
faster, much faster if you had a bridge.
That
which
has
you don't
got
have.
to be on the
Yeah,
agenda
yeah.
somewhere.
Oh yeah, yeah. So is this going to be a topic for all the candidates this year? I'm not so sure because
Well-
there's so much focus on this overlay business.
If anyone's listening, it's a good point, because it is almost the last frontier in
In
Cambridge.
many respects,
you know,
it's true. So I hope
Yeah.
it wouldn't.
if it's done right.
I hope some attention
Yeah.
to the Alewife Quadrangle doesn't get lost in
Right.
all the controversy over East Cambridge Courthouse
Right.
or overlay or this or that.
Oh,
There are other things,
are
or
we gonna
bikes,
talk about
bike
that?
infrastructure, right? That we have a tendency in Cambridge these days, really just like national. There's a whole country with all sorts of things. Yet it seems
Yeah.
if you tune into the news, it's all about immigration and the border.
Yeah.
I kind of think there are a few other issues in the in
Although
the
it does
country.
seem to predominate since we are a land of immigrants, so we won't.
I know it,
mean,
I
I'm
know
just
it.
saying,
But the
it
thing
just-
is that it's sort of like
Yeah.
how magicians do their magic
Yeah.
is basically they draw your attention to one thing,
Yeah.
and then meanwhile
Well,
they're
Trump
doing
is
the magic
doing that,
elsewhere.
yeah, and meanwhile he's taking
But they were all
away-
doing it.
yeah,
Honestly,
I know,
the entirety of political rhetoric
Yeah,
at the
it's-
national level is all
it's-
distraction.
yeah,
And
yeah.
and the thing is that if everybody just focuses on like one or two things in Cambridge, and we elect an entire city council purely on one or two
Yeah.
very narrow issues, you might have a little buyer's remorse come 2020. So think about the whole candidate, the whole issue, or the whole
There's
range
many
of issues.
Right, it's housing,
And
it's climate
and
change.
think about
it's
your own issues too,
education, yeah.
not just the ones that people tell you are the issues. Quite honestly, what
Yeah.
happens at the East Cambridge Courthouse, which
Yeah.
we should talk about,
I would like to talk about that, 'cause
that-
it seems like there's this last ditch effort
yeah,
this
but
weekend
that's
to do
that's
stuff.
not a defining issue for the
No.
whole city.
No.
So if you live
And it,
elsewhere in the city,
yeah,
it's really a relatively minor point.
I
So,
know.
so anyway, it is getting exciting, and if you're a candidate, you better get those papers in pretty soon and make sure you fill out those fields because I'm watching, and so
Yeah.
is a lot of other people.
Yeah, you're
So
watching.
anyway, so we'll
We'll
see
see
you
you in the next segment.
on Cambridge Inside Out.